The hidden truth, the great assembly hall of Nexus Prime, stretched out like a metallic cathedral, its crystalline dome revealing the swirling nebula beyond. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the tiered seats, their forms as diverse as the stars. Themselves, some towered on multiple legs, others floated in containment fields, and a few existed as pure energy contained within mechanical shells. Despite their differences, they shared one common goal that had brought them together across the galaxy: the complete and utter destruction of humanity. Marcus Chen sat motionless in the Zilani delegation section, his appearance perfectly mimicking that of the tall, grey-skinned diplomats around him. Advanced biomodification technology had reshaped his bone structure, altered his skin tone, and even changed his internal organs to match Zilani physiology. To every scanner, every test, every observer, he appeared to be exactly what his forged credentials claimed: Ambassador Teleran of the Zilani Collective, a minor diplomatic official from a peaceful trading world. But beneath the carefully constructed disguise, Marcus's human heart hammered against ribs that had been surgically repositioned. He was humanity's last hope, inserted deep into the enemy's most sacred gathering. For 3 years, he had maintained this cover, slowly working his way up through the Zilani diplomatic corps. Now, finally, he sat in the chamber where his species' fate would be decided. High Chancellor Morduk, a massive insectoid being with chitinous armor that gleamed like polished obsidian, raised his 4 arms for silence. The hall fell quiet except for the gentle hum of translation devices and life support systems. When Mordok spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber with the authority of someone who commanded fleets that could sterilize worlds. Honored delegates, we gather today to address the final solution to the human problem. 57 years have passed since we believed this plague species was eliminated. Yet intelligence reports continue to surface, suggesting survivors remain hidden throughout our territories. A ripple of angry, chittering, hissing, and electromagnetic pulses swept through the assembly. Marcus forced himself to mirror the disapproving gestures of the Zilani around him, though every fiber of his being wanted to leap from his seat and fight. Instead, he listened as Mordok continued his speech of hatred. The humans proved themselves to be the most dangerous species our galaxy has ever encountered. They refused to accept their place in the natural order. They fought with a desperation and creativity that caught our combined fleets off guard time and again. Even when faced with certain defeat, they continued to resist, to adapt, to survive in ways that defied all logic and prediction. Marcus remembered those desperate years of the Human Alliance war. He had been barely 18 when the first alien fleets appeared in Earth's solar system, demanding surrender and subjugation. Humanity had refused, as Mordok said, and the war that followed had lasted nearly a decade. Against all odds, humans had held their own against species with technology thousands of years more advanced. But numbers and resources eventually told. Earth fell, the colonies were overrun, and humanity was declared extinct. Except they weren't. Small groups of survivors had escaped to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, 2 places so remote and dangerous that even the Alliance rarely ventured. There, Marcus was one of perhaps 10,000 humans still alive, scattered across the void in hidden colonies that clung to life through ingenuity and sheer stubborn will. Today, Mordok announced, we will vote on implementing Project Cleanse, a final biological solution that will ensure no human DNA can survive anywhere in our galaxy. No matter how well hidden these vermin believe themselves to be. A new voice rose from the Krellian section, harsh and militaristic. Counselor Vexter, a reptilian warrior whose scales bore the scars of 100 battles, stood with predatory grace. The Krellian Empire has developed a retrovirus specifically engineered to target human genetic markers. Once released into planetary atmospheres, it will seek out and destroy any organism carrying human DNA within 72 hours. Marcus felt ice form in his modified veins, a bioweapon that could hunt down humans by their very genetic code. It would make hiding impossible. Even if the survivors had altered their appearances as he had, their DNA would still mark them for death. The weapon is already in production, Vextar continued with obvious satisfaction. Within 6 months, we can deploy it to every system where human survivors might be hiding. The asteroid fields of the Kepler expanse, the rogue planets of the Dark Zone, even the forbidden sectors beyond the galactic rim. Nowhere will be safe for them. Ambassador Zelona of the Etherian Confederation, a being of shifting energy patterns, contained within a translucent humanoid form, pulsed with uncertain colors. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality of her people, but Marcus could hear the doubt beneath it. Such a weapon poses risks beyond its intended target. Genetic viruses can mutate, evolve, spread beyond their original parameters. Are we certain this will not affect other species? Vextar's laugh was like grinding stone. The Etherians always worry about hypothetical dangers, while real threats escape justice. The retrovirus is precisely calibrated. It poses no risk to any sentient species, except humans. Marcus watched the debate that followed, memorizing every detail about Project Cleanse. He noted which delegates supported it enthusiastically, which had reservations, and which remained silent. The Krellians and their military allies pushed hard for immediate deployment. The more scientific species wanted additional testing. The Etherians and a few others raised ethical concerns that were quickly dismissed. As the hours passed, Marcus realized he needed to act. Simply gathering intelligence would not be enough. If this vote passed and the weapon was deployed, every human survivor would die within months. He had to find a way to stop it from within. During a recess, Marcus approached the beverage stations where delegates from different species mingled. He positioned himself near a group of Krellian military officers, using his enhanced hearing to eavesdrop on their conversation while pretending to study the Zelani delegation's notes. The first batch will be ready for testing within 30 cycles, one officer was saying. Vextar wants to deploy it to the Kepler system first. Intelligence suggests several human colonies might be hiding in those asteroids. Marcus's blood ran cold. The Kepler expanse was indeed home to human survivors, including New Haven colony where nearly 1,000 people struggled to build a life in the harsh environment of a mining asteroid. Among them were families, children who had never known any home but the cold rock where they were born. What about the other target systems? Another Krellian asked. Classified until after the vote, but I can tell you we've identified at least 12 high-probability locations. The bioweapon will be deployed simultaneously to prevent any from warning the others. Marcus moved away before his reactions could betray him. 12 systems, thousands of lives hanging in the balance, and possibly the last remnant of human civilization. He had to get word back to the colonies somehow, but first, he needed to sabotage this weapon program from the inside. Returning to his seat as the session resumed, Marcus began to formulate a plan. He couldn't fight the entire Galactic Alliance alone, but he might not need to. The alliance between these species had always been fragile, held together more by fear of humanity than genuine cooperation. If he could exploit those cracks, turn them against each other. High Chancellor Murdoch called for order as the debate entered its final phase. We will now hear closing statements before the vote. The future of galactic security hangs in the balance. Marcus stood, his artificial Zilani vocal cords producing the proper harmonics as he requested permission to address the assembly. Several delegates looked surprised. The Zilani were known for being peaceful and rarely spoke during military discussions. Honored delegates, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. The Zilani collective has remained silent during much of this debate, but we cannot stay quiet any longer. We support the goal of ensuring humanity never again threatens galactic peace, but we have concerns about the proposed method. Vextar's scaled head turned toward him with obvious irritation. The Zilani have always been soft when it comes to necessary military action. What concerns could you possibly have about eliminating a proven threat? Marcus had prepared for this moment, crafting his words carefully. Our scientists have reviewed the bioweapon data shared with the Council. While we understand the Krellian Empire's confidence in their creation, we worry about the precedent this sets. Today, it targets human DNA. Tomorrow, perhaps some of us might find ourselves inconvenient to other members of the Alliance. A murmur ran through the assembly. Marcus pressed his advantage. Furthermore, deploying such a weapon simultaneously across 12 systems requires extraordinary coordination between our fleets. Such coordination creates vulnerabilities. What if human survivors have advanced warning? What if they've developed countermeasures? We risk not only failure, but also revealing the locations of our military assets. Vextar snarled, but Marcus noticed several delegates nodding thoughtfully. The seeds of doubt were taking root. The Zilani propose a more cautious approach. Test the weapon on a single, confirmed human settlement first. Observe the results. Ensure it works as intended and poses no risks to allied species. Only then proceed with full deployment. The suggestion sparked immediate debate. Some species supported the cautious approach, while others worried the delay would give humans time to escape or develop defenses. Marcus sat back down, satisfied that he had bought time and created divisions within the Alliance. As arguments raged around him, Marcus began planning his next moves. He had slowed Project Cleanse, but not stopped it. Now he needed to find a way to get warning to the human colonies and, if possible, sabotage the bioweapon program entirely. The vote was postponed, pending further committee review. Exactly what Marcus had hoped for. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, he noticed Vextar watching him with suspicious eyes. The Krellian warrior approached, his massive form casting a shadow over the smaller Zilani. Your people have never shown such interest in military strategy before, Vextar said, his voice carrying a subtle threat. Why the sudden concern? Marcus met the reptilian's gaze without flinching, letting his disgust show as appropriate for a Zilani reacting to Krellian aggression. Because, Counselor, we prefer not to see the galaxy turned into a wasteland by those too eager to use weapons they don't fully understand. Vextar studied him for a long moment before turning away. But Marcus knew he had made a dangerous enemy. The Krellian would be watching him now, looking for any sign that Ambassador Teleran was not what he seemed. As Marcus returned to his quarters in the diplomatic section of Nexus Prime, he began composing coded messages to send to the human colonies. Time was running out, but for the first time in years, he felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. The aliens in that chamber wanted every human dead, but they had no idea that one was sitting among them, fighting back with the very qualities they feared most: human determination, adaptability, and the refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. The war for humanity's survival was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The ultimate gambit. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus successfully delayed the vote on Project Cleanse, but he could feel the walls closing in. Councillor Vexter had been asking questions about Ambassador Telleran's background, requesting additional verification of his credentials from the Zilani homeworld. So far, the forged documents and carefully placed accomplices had held up under scrutiny, but Marcus knew it was only a matter of time. He sat in his quarters aboard Nexus Prime, staring at the coded responses he had received from the human colonies scattered across the galaxy. The news was both encouraging and terrifying. The survivors had received his warnings about Project Cleanse and were taking precautions, but they had also shared intelligence that chilled him to the bone. The Krellians weren't just developing one bioweapon. They had multiple programs running, in parallel, each targeting different aspects of human physiology. Even worse, his sabotage efforts had not gone unnoticed. Someone was investigating the security breaches in the Krellian research facilities, and that someone was getting closer. To the truth, a soft chime indicated an incoming message. Marcus activated his secure communication array, expecting another update from New Haven Colony. Instead, Ambassador Zelona energy pattern filled the small holographic projector, her colors pulsing with urgent patterns. "Telleran, I need to speak with you immediately. My quarters, sublevel 7. Come alone." The connection terminated, leaving Marcus staring at the empty space where her image had been. This could be a trap, but Zelona had been one of the few voices of reason during the Project Cleanse debates. If anyone might be sympathetic to his cause, it would be the Etherian diplomat. Marcus made his way through the station's corridors, taking a circuitous route to avoid surveillance patterns he had memorized over the months. Nexus Prime was a marvel of engineering, a massive station built at the gravitational balance point between 3 stars. But it was also a maze of passages designed to accommodate hundreds of different alien physiologies. When he reached Zelona's quarters, the door dilated to admit him immediately. The Etherian diplomat floated near the center of the room, her energy patterns more agitated than he had ever seen them. "I know what you are," she said without preamble. Marcus felt his carefully maintained composure crack for just a moment before reasserting control. "I'm not sure what you mean, Ambassador. You're human." Zelona's patterns shifted to deep blue, indicating certainty rather than accusation. "I've suspected for weeks, but your reaction to the bioweapon debate confirmed it. No Zilani would have spoken so passionately about military strategy unless they had a personal stake in the outcome." Marcus considered his options. He could try to maintain his cover, attempt to convince her she was mistaken. He could try to silence her permanently, though the idea of killing someone who might be an ally sickened him. Or he could take the biggest gamble of his life and trust her. "Why haven't you reported me?" he asked quietly. Zilana's patterns shifted to a warm golden hue. "Because I believe you're right about the dangers of Project Cleanse, and because I've spent the last 50 years studying the Human Alliance War, trying to understand why your people fought so desperately. What I learned changed everything I thought I knew about the conflict." She activated a holographic display, showing historical battle records, diplomatic communications, and classified intelligence reports Marcus had never seen before. The official histories paint humans as aggressors, a species that refused to accept the natural order of galactic civilization. But the real records tell a different story. Humanity was never given a chance to join the galactic community as equals. You were classified as a developing species and marked for subjugation from the moment first contact was made. Marcus watched the data scroll past, seeing his people struggle from an outside perspective for the first time. Initial human attempts at peaceful negotiation rejected out of hand. Offers of technological exchange dismissed as inadequate. Requests for territorial sovereignty denied because humans occupied worlds the Alliance wanted for themselves. Your people fought because they were fighting for their right to exist as a free species, Zilona continued. Every other civilization in the galaxy had been allowed to develop naturally and join the Alliance as full members. Only humanity was deemed too dangerous for membership, too unpredictable to be trusted with freedom. Then why support a extinction? Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Fear, Zilona admitted, her patterns dimming with shame. Your people's adaptability, your refusal to surrender even when facing overwhelming odds, your ability to innovate under pressure. These traits terrified the Alliance leadership. They convinced us that humans would eventually become powerful enough to threaten everyone else. Marcus felt a bitter laugh escape his throat. So they decided to commit genocide to prevent a hypothetical future threat. Yes, and I've spent decades watching the galaxy grow more rigid, more fearful, more authoritarian as a result. The alliance that destroyed humanity has become exactly the kind of oppressive regime your people died fighting against. Zilona moved closer, her energy field warm against Marcus's modified skin. I want to help you stop Project Cleanse, but I need to know how many humans are really still alive. Marcus hesitated, then decided that trust had to start somewhere. Fewer than 10,000, scattered across dozens of hidden colonies. We're not a threat to anyone. We just want to survive, to preserve something of what humanity was. 10,000. Zilona's patterns pulsed with what Marcus recognized as grief. From a species of 12 billion, reduced to 10,000 survivors hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy. It's more than the Alliance thinks exists, Marcus said grimly. And if Project Cleanse succeeds, it will be more than survive. Then we need to stop it. But Vexter is suspicious of you, and High Chancellor Morduk is pushing for an emergency. Vote within days. Direct sabotage won't be enough this time. Marcus had been thinking the same thing. I have a plan, but it's dangerous. If it fails, both of our species could pay the price. Tell me. Marcus activated his own private files, showing Zilona intelligence he had gathered about the various Alliance species and their hidden conflicts. The Alliance has always been held together by fear of external threats. First, the Voidwalkers, from outside the galaxy, then humanity. But what if that fear turned inward? What if the species started to see each other as the real threats? You want to create a civil war. I want to create enough suspicion and paranoia that they're too busy watching each other to focus on hunting humans. The Krellians have been developing bioweapons in secret. The Threks have been building an illegal fleet in the outer reaches. The Sithic have been conducting genetic experiments that violate Alliance treaties. Every species in the Alliance has been breaking the rules, but they've all been too focused on humans to notice. Zilona studied the intelligence data with growing understanding. If this information became public simultaneously, the Alliance would tear itself apart, investigating each other instead of deploying Project Cleanse. At minimum, it would buy time for the human colonies to relocate to safer regions, and at maximum, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. At maximum, it might create enough chaos for humanity to negotiate a real peace treaty, one that recognizes our right to exist. They spent the next several hours planning the data release, identifying key communication nodes, and timing the revelations for maximum impact. As dawn broke over Nexus Prime's artificial horizon, they had a strategy that might actually work. But their plans were interrupted by an emergency alert. All delegates were ordered to report to the main assembly hall immediately. Marcus and Zelona exchanged worried glances as they hurried through the corridors. The assembly hall was buzzing with activity when they arrived. High Chancellor Mordock stood at the central podium, his chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Councillor Vextar flanked him, along with several other military leaders Marcus didn't recognize. "Delegates," Mordock announced, "we have received intelligence of the most serious nature. It appears that human infiltrators have penetrated our security and are actively sabotaging Alliance operations from within." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice, but he forced himself to remain motionless as Mordock continued. "Classified research facilities have been breached, sensitive data has been stolen, and our communication networks have been compromised. This confirms our worst fears about human adaptability and cunning. They are not extinct, as we believed, but have been operating among us, hidden in plain sight." The assembly erupted in angry voices and panicked chittering. Several delegates began making accusations against their neighbors, exactly the kind of paranoia Marcus had hoped to create. But too late and for the wrong reasons. Vextar stepped forward, his predatory gaze sweeping over the assembled diplomats. "We have identified several individuals who warrant immediate investigation. All delegations will submit to intensive security screening, including genetic analysis and deep psychological evaluation." Marcus knew his carefully constructed identity wouldn't survive that level of scrutiny. His biomodifications could fool casual scans, but genetic analysis would reveal human DNA. Markers, no matter how well disguised. That's when Zelona made a decision that changed everything. "Hi, Chancellor," she said, rising from her seat with patterns blazing in brilliant white light. "Before we begin this investigation, I have information that the Assembly needs to hear." She activated her personal communication array, transmitting the intelligence files Marcus had shared with her directly to every delegate's personal systems. Within seconds, the assembly hall was filled with the chaos Marcus had planned to create, but under very different circumstances. Accusations flew as delegates discovered their rivals, secret projects, and treaty violations. The Krellian program was exposed alongside the Threk's illegal fleet and the Sithok genetic experiments. Decades of hidden conflicts and betrayals spilled into the open as species that had barely tolerated each other's presence began openly arguing. In the confusion, Marcus began moving toward the exit, hoping to escape before anyone noticed. But Vextar's keen eyes tracked his movement, and the Krellian warrior moved to intercept him. "Ambassador," Toward Vextar called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. Or, should I say, human spy. The assembly fell silent as all eyes turned toward them. Marcus knew the game was up. His cover was blown, and there was no point in maintaining the pretense any longer. But he was still human, and humans had never surrendered easily. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber as he allowed his true identity to show. "I am a survivor of humanity, and I stand here today not as your enemy, but as proof that we never stopped fighting for our right to exist." The reaction was immediate and violent. Delegates roared for his immediate execution, while security forces moved to surround him. But Marcus wasn't finished speaking. "Look around you," he shouted over the noise. "Look at what you've become. You call yourselves an alliance, but you're nothing more than a collection of species united only by fear and hatred. You've spent 50 years hunting the survivors of a genocide you committed, while ignoring the real threats growing within your own ranks." Zelona moved to stand beside him, her energy patterns blazing with defiant light. "He speaks the truth. We've become everything we claimed to be protecting the galaxy from: oppressive, paranoid, willing to commit any atrocity to maintain our power." More voices began to join them. Ambassador Kethma of the Voidborn Collective, whose people had also been subjugated by the Alliance. Trade Minister Yiloth of the Rim, worlds whose systems had been strip-mined to fuel the war machine. Even some smaller human colonies that had been hiding for decades began transmitting messages of support. Having been inspired by Marcus's revelation, the Alliance was fracturing before their eyes, and High Chancellor Mordak realized it. In desperation, he ordered the immediate deployment of Project Cleanse to all suspected human colonies, hoping that completing the genocide would restore unity to the Alliance. But it was too late. Vextar's own subordinates questioned the orders, unwilling to risk their fleets in a controversial deployment while their government was collapsing. Other species began withdrawing their support entirely, more concerned with protecting themselves than hunting humans. As security forces finally reached him, Marcus smiled. He had succeeded beyond his wildest hopes. Project Cleanse was dead, the Alliance was in chaos, and for the first time in 50 years, humanity had allies among the stars. They might arrest him, they might even execute him, but the war for human survival was over. His people would live, would grow, would once again reach for the stars with the determination and hope that had always defined them. Asterisk. Marcus Chen had walked into a room full of aliens who wanted every human dead, and he had walked out victorious. Sometimes, the greatest weapon was simply the courage to stand up and remind the galaxy what it meant to be human.